Okay. Nikki, if you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So once again, thank you everybody for coming, and especially special thanks to Dr. Kane. I know it's a Friday night for everybody of week 1, so really excited for everybody to be here. We're actually just going to kick off with our land acknowledgement, but also want to share, if y'all have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And then when we get to the Q&A, just feel free to unmute yourself so that you can ask questions directly to Dr. Kane, and we'll go ahead and get started with the land acknowledgement.
UCLA sits on Tongva territory. What does that mean? It means before Los Angeles morphed into a major city and a desert, it was home to native people who filled the land with tule reed and willow homes. It was beautiful, lush green wetlands. It was abundant with natural food and clean, drinkable water. In under 300 years, America has managed to destroy such beauty and health into what we see today. But hope is not lost. As long as you are here, you too have become stewards of the land by doing your best to minimize your footprint, educating yourself on local issues, standing with us during our struggles and fights to protect land, water, and clean up contamination. You prove to be good stewards of the land, continuing healthy life for the next 7 generations.
Thank you, Nikki. So I wanted to take some time to reintroduce myself, but specifically to introduce Dr. Kane to everyone. And if you could stop sharing your screen. Actually, you know what? Let's do the roll call if we can. So for everyone that is here, what's your hometown? So for example, I'm from Chicago. Where is everyone from? You can drop it in the chat if you like. Anaheim. I have some family in Orange County. Whittier. Fremont. Okay. DC. Okay. Bay Area. Rolling Heights. A lot of Cali folks. Porter Ranch. I know Porter Ranch very well. Porter Ranch currently at UCLA. So you're on campus. Cool. What major and year are folks? Oh, Michigan. I'm another Midwestern person. Thank you, Dr. Kane. I'm not alone. Okay. Bio majors, first year, second years, class of 2024. All right. Welcome. Cognitive science, 4th year. Yay, transfer. Yes, transfer students.
This is my dog. She's from Burbank.
What's your dog's name?
Sophie.
Sophie. Hi, Sophie. Cool. Well, let's actually take some time to get to know Dr. Kane a little bit this evening. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. And cool.
Do you want me to talk?
Yeah. Yes, of course. Yes, please. So
Okay.
if I can ask like just a little bit about you. So where you're from, how did you start out in the field? And Nikki, you can stop sharing your screen so that I can actually see Dr. Kane.
Hi, everybody. So I am, like I said in the chat, from Dryden, Michigan. It's a very small town, a rural town. I graduated high school with 32 people in my class, so it was tiny. I lived on a dirt road, and there were plenty of people who, like teachers and things, who told me that I could not be I'm a marine ecologist, so I couldn't be a marine biologist because I would have to go to school for a really long time and move really far away, and I probably would never get a job. So I did it anyway, and I have a job, and I love my job, and I teach students about marine biology all the time. So I'm a little tired. This first week has kicked my butt a little bit, but I'm teaching a big intro marine science and an intro bio course right now. So two big courses. What else do you want to know? I went to Michigan State University for undergrad. I was really fortunate to have applied for, I didn't know what the heck I was doing. I was the first in my family to go to college. So I'm first gen. I'm sure, I don't know if some of you are as well, but I didn't know what I was doing. I applied. I thought I wanted to get the heck out of my town. And so I was just applied. And ended up in this small little residential science program where all of the first year biology students all lived in the same dorm, and we took a lot of our first classes together. So we were like the smaller, like almost like a learning community, but dorm size. And it was great because I got to know people and build a community of students. And for the next 4 years, anywhere I went on campus, any event, any party, any class, I had people I already knew in that class. Right. So I know it's a little harder right now because nobody's in the same physical location, but the connections that you can make in the community that you can make right now really makes a huge difference in a few years, right? It was you're struggling through an upper division class and you look over and you know that person, they can help you study with you. During undergrad, I ended up doing a summer research program. I worked every summer, but one summer I was able to find a stipend to do some research. And so I ended up at UCLA doing research in marine science, and with some grad students, loved it. And so when it came time to figure out what to do after school, I thought, well, I think I want to do marine biology research for real, not just in my dream. So I did it. And I ended up here at UCLA and I did my PhD here. I've been here now in some form since 2001 with a 1-year break to go to Washington, DC. I worked in the federal government, NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I did a fellowship there for a year. And then I came back to LA, finished up my PhD, started teaching at a few different universities. I was at Chapman University and Pierce College and for UCLA Extension, and then UCLA hired me on full time. So I teach 2 courses every quarter, and a couple in the summer. I teach things like LS7B. So if you're a STEM major in the sciences, there's a very good chance you're taking LS7B or will or have already, or maybe you have me right now. I'm not sure. I have 360 some students in my class.
There's someone from
Oh,
EEB 109.
109. Okay, so
Yeah.
I'm teaching Intro to Marine Science right now. Which one? Who's in 109? Oh, hey.
Me. Hi.
Hi. Yeah, Intro to Marine Science. So that's like 240 some people, I think, this quarter. And then I teach other upper division classes for aquatic communities and invertebrate biology. A class that I really love to teach is a small, like 6-unit lab course, which is marine botany, which is this screen behind me is seaweed. It's algae. And that's what marine botany is all about. And when we get to do in-person classes, we go on camping trips. And usually I take students camping for the first times in their lives, and it's super fun. And then I sometimes get to teach, like every other year, I teach a marine biology field quarter, which is 15 students doing research projects for the whole quarter. So we go out to Catalina Island, or last time we went up to Bodega Bay, and we live and do research right there together for like 3 or 4 weeks. It's really intense. It's really fun. It's really hard work. It's very rewarding for everybody though. So anyway, that's kind of what I do now and I love it. What else do you want to know? Other things that I do? Do I ever not work? Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say some of your hobbies, if you don't mind sharing, we would love
Yeah,
to
well,
learn
you
about
saw
that.
one of my dogs, right? You saw one of the dogs come through, and she's my coworker these days. She hangs out on the bed, which is actually behind me. You can't see it, but she hangs out on my bed and you know, barks at the mailman right in the middle of important lectures. So that's really fun for me. I have a roommate, so the 2 of us like to hang out and, you know, have a glass of wine on the patio in the evening and talk about our day. She works for the city of LA, so she always has stress that she needs to get rid of, and so do I. So we do that a lot. I love to go on road trips, you know, so I driving around California if I can, camping when possible. I did kind of sneak out during the quarantine for the whole month of August to Utah and saw my best friend, and we went camping for a week. And so Don't worry, I was safe. I wore a mask and I social distance, but I needed a break, man. So yeah, I like to go to wineries, and locally, the view is beautiful, the wine is delicious. Support our local economy, so make memories with all my friends, and then I do like to visit my family. So they're still all in Michigan, and my mom's dying right now that I can't get out to there to see her. She misses me, so it's like, you coming? When are you coming? I don't know, Mom. So that will never, if you have family that's pressuring you to come visit, do as much as you can, but don't feel too stressed if you have to prioritize school for briefly in order to get through it. So
Thank you for sharing. We appreciate it. And thank you for letting Sophie also kind of jump in and visit with us a
yeah,
little
there's
bit.
another one here somewhere, but he doesn't like being held, so he's probably hiding behind the couch.
It's all good. Hopefully we'll get another visit before we wrap up for the evening. For folks, Nikki and Dr. Kane actually did a mock office hour of what it would be like. So for folks that are either in our class or have other classes, to kind of figure out what would it be like to kind of go through that process and to take off some of the stress and anxiety related to that. So Nikki, if you share your screen, and we're just going to briefly go over the office hour, learn a little bit about coral reef. And some quick Q&A and tips for you. And
And
then
Anahita, if you hear the explanation of tides, just know that I'm going to do a better job explaining tides next week, okay? It was a pretty rough explanation.
No, it was great. I got to watch it. I was like, I think I got it, but there's always YouTube.
well, we enjoyed it. It's good. I hope you all will enjoy it. And then if y'all have questions, please make sure, like, just hold on to your questions. And then as soon as we finish the mock office hour, you'll be able to answer those questions to Dr. Kane.
Hi.
Oh, hi. Hi, Dr. Kane. So I'm from your EEV 109 class. I just had some questions I wanted to get ahead for the midterm coming up. I just know I'm going to end up falling behind, so I'm just asking now.
That's great. I'm glad you came to office hours early.
Yeah. Yeah, so I missed like the last part of the lecture slides. I had to go to work. So I was wondering what you were saying about the slides. I just kind of saw it on the slides, but I haven't gotten to it.
Yeah, so we were just talking about the end there. A topic that a lot of students, don't have as much experience with is talking about the tides, like what causes a high tide and a low tide. Have you ever been to the beach and one day you get there and the tide's really, the water level is really high and there's almost no sand to sit on. Another day you get there and there's tons of sand and lots of rock showing, right? So we were talking about what it is that causes that to happen. And so do you ever, while you're out at night in Westwood, maybe you look up and see the moon and notice that it's different sizes, right? So sometimes it's a full moon, and when there's a full moon, we tend to get tides that are really high tides, and then about 6 hours later, really low tides. That's because the gravity that's pulling on the Earth changes the height of the water that's on the Earth. So over time, over a 24-hour cycle, you might pass under this really large bulge of water that's being caused by the moon pulling on the oceans. And then the land part of the Earth actually rotates underneath the water. And so you can be in that exact same spot. And 6 hours later, it's low tide. And 6 hours after that, it's high tide again. So we were just talking about those. So I encourage you to I posted a video about it online. So if you want to take a look at that, and then, I think that's good because it kind of gives you that visual. But if you have additional questions, I'm happy to draw it out for you and we can talk about it.
I guess I would just ask, like, why would it be 6 hours specifically? I noticed you said that.
Yeah, it's because the Earth is this giant sphere, and the part that we're standing on is the hard Earth part, or like the terrestrial part, right? And the water moves independently of that. And so when you have the moon pulling, it's making a big bulge on one side of the Earth. It's actually creating another big bulge on the other side of the Earth too. And so if the land part of the earth is rotating underneath that water,
Mm-hmm.
right? And the earth rotates around its axis. So think
Yeah.
of the earth is if you have a piece of fruit, sometimes this is really helpful. I know that sounds silly, but like if you have a grapefruit or an orange, think of it as the earth, right? And you can actually rotate it. You can draw continents on it. You can
Yeah.
draw right on that, and then you can just peel it and eat it later. But you can imagine that after 24 hours, as that earth is rotating around its axis, right? Every 6 hours, it's either going to be passing under the water that's really bulged or not bulged at all, because it's sort of it's 90 degrees to the moon. I don't know if I'm
Oh,
explaining
okay.
that very well, but let's draw a picture and
Yeah.
then I can help you figure that
That
out.
makes sense. Yeah. So like, is it like, so like the 6 hours, like four sides if there's like
Yeah,
two
four
bulges and
sides.
then two like low tides, I guess. Okay, that
Yeah,
makes
that's
sense.
exactly it. Yeah.
For the midterm, would I need to like know how the moon corresponds to like when it's a high tide or low tide?
Yeah. So if there's a question, one of the things that we talked about in lecture was whether certain times of the year, certain times of the year, certain times of the month, the moon is full or the moon is new, where you can barely see the moon at all.
Yeah.
Right? You look up in the sky and it's just dark. That's when there's the most gravitational pull on the water of the earth. Right. So those are times when you have the biggest difference between your really high tide and your low tide. We call those spring tides. Nothing to do with the month or the time of the year, but it has to do with the size of the moon. The size of the moon from our perspective. During the times in between, when we have a waxing or a waning moon, where it's either getting more full or getting less full from our Earth perspective, right? Those are the times that we actually have a lower gravitational pull, and overall, this is more complicated of a topic to talk about. Overall, that means that the sun actually pulls on the earth at the same time. So the sun and the moon are both pulling on the earth, but from a 90-degree angle to each other. What that means is that the bulge is very small. And so you have the smallest difference between the highest high and the lowest low tide.
Okay, that makes sense. For like the midterm, I mean, in general, like, should I be referring more to the lectures or like the textbook? For, you said it's like sometimes it can get like more in depth.
Yeah, so tends to be the way I do things is that, at the beginning of each lecture, I give you learning objectives, and that's kind of your roadmap, right? So that's your way to kind of figure out what is it that I need to know from these topics before I take the exam. And so you can use those learning objectives. One way to do that is to kind of use those as your study guide. So, at the end of the week after class, take those learning objectives and try to write about them, right? So take one is what is a neap tide? And, write about those and see if you can draw a picture. Anytime you can draw a picture and explain it that way, or try explaining it to a roommate. And seeing if you have a good understanding of it. That's one really good way to study. I won't put stuff on the exam that is only in the textbook that we've never talked about in class. So you don't have to worry about tiny little minute details. I really want you to focus on the big concepts.
Okay, so I mean, big concepts, so I shouldn't be just like trying to focus on like specific, I don't know, vocabulary or anything?
No, vocabulary is important, right? Because you need to be able to understand the vocabulary in order to understand those concepts. But for example, I'm not going to ask you, what is the volume of the ocean and expect you to tell me exactly how many gallons that is, right? So that's not something I would ask you.
Okay, cool. I think that's all I got. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was wondering, how are things going for you in the online environment?
I mean, it's okay so far. I've kind of been enjoying how we have like a lot of the lectures to look back on since they're all on CCLE. I remember before, like with Bruin Cast only being like semi-available depending on the class. this wasn't really like a common thing to just have everything back to refer to. So I've been enjoying that. And I mean, of course, I kind of miss being on campus and like actually getting to see like my professors and like other people in my class. So it's been different, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I think that's been hard for us too, right? So we're, you know, one of the reasons I teach is that I really love interacting with my students and, you know, being able to share new cool things with them. And doing that in person is in some ways easier, you know, but there's been some great things that have happened with teaching online as well. So the fact that, you know, everybody, more people can come to office hours usually than in the past, because nobody has to worry about getting there in time and walking down the hill and finding my office, which is sometimes hard to find. And so pretty much everybody can just log in wherever they are, and that's been really nice because I think I've interacted with more students online, and you know. That's made things, you know, a little bit less isolating, like forming those communities. So I love it when students show up and ask great questions.
Yeah, and I think for me too, just because usually too, I mean, I also like work from home now, but back then it would be a lot harder because I'd have to go back and forth between classes just to try to make things. So that's also like it works for me.
Yeah. Now, commuting is definitely easier in this situation.
Yeah. But yeah, so that's all the questions I got. I guess I can email if I have any more, or should I send them to my TA?
Yeah, you can definitely email me. And in fact, one great place to send questions about content is if you want to post them to our class discussion board, because the TAs and I both check that every day, and we can answer your questions there. And that way, if any question you have, there's probably lots of other students that have that same question. So we're happy to join in on there and just answer that question for everybody. And if it's something you're not really comfortable posting about, definitely shoot me an email. It might take me a little bit longer to answer emails. There's a lot of emails this quarter, but I'm happy to respond in the next day or two.
I guess for the discussion board, are there any kind of questions that you wouldn't reply to, like if it's too close to the exam, or like what's going to be
usually
asked?
Usually I'll make an announcement before the exam, but usually like in the last 24 hours before the exam, I won't join on to discussion board and answer a bunch of content questions, because if I did, I would only be doing that for 24 hours, right? So if you have a good question that you're preparing for the exam, ask it early. So that gives me enough time to log in and make sure I clarify any misconceptions that you or other students might have. Of course, if it's something personal, make sure you just send me an email and I can keep that confidential. But any content questions or like clarification on deadlines, those are great things to ask in the discussion board, because like another student may be able to answer those for you too, without you having to wait around for me to check my email. So
yeah, okay, that works.
Yeah,
all right, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Look forward to seeing you next week.
All right, see you.
Bye.
Okay, that's some great acting for Nikki and Dr. Kane. Pretty much them being themselves and hanging out
Not
with
an
us.
actress at all. So
all good, all good.
Hey.
Amazing job to both of you. Before we get to the Q&A, as Nikki and I were sharing in the chat, y'all, please feel free to unmute yourselves when we get to the Q&A, so you just ask questions freely to Dr. Kane. And if you're not comfortable, feel free to drop them in the chat. Nikki or I will read them for you. But I wanted to ask Dr. Kane, just to kick us off, what are a couple of tips that you have for folks regarding office hours and building connection?
Great. Some of those are here on the screen, so I'll talk about those, and then I have a couple of additional tips that I can give you. But one is, throughout this quarter, especially, it's harder to do because we're online, but try to find your support system, whether that's other students in your class to study with. And I know lots of people have class group meets going on and discussion boards and different things, but also ask other people who have maybe already had these classes. Ask the third or fourth year students, that you can ask questions about, like what order do they recommend you take classes, or who are the most engaging professors that or that they've enjoyed taking classes from, those sorts of things. That always helps a lot. Go to office hours. We really do like seeing students in office hours. It's kind of sad when I have an office hour and nobody comes. I mean, I always have work to do. I can definitely do other things, but like I set that time aside specifically for my students. And so I want you to be able to come and ask questions. We really do want to see you. And so some tips for when you do go to office hours, there's sort of like the best things you can do. And then if you can't do those, there's lots of other great things you can do. And so one really good thing is, if you've gone through the material and you have questions, so, take notes on your reading or notes during lecture of things that, oh, I wonder about this, or I have questions about this, go ahead and have a little side in your notebook where you just jot down what those questions are, so that when you do go to office hours that week, you already have a list of questions ready and you can just read from them. If that's something you didn't get a chance to do, it doesn't mean you should skip office hours. It means you should still come, because other students will be there and they'll ask questions. And you can just listen to their questions. I have students who will just come and go, I don't really have any questions. I just wanted to come and see what other students were asking. And I love that, because they're curious, they want to learn something, and 9 times out of 10, they end up thinking of a question while they're there because they've been inspired by the other student's question, right? Often everybody's office hours are a little bit different. Sometimes professors do more one-on-one office hours. Some do like a whole group of students at a time. Usually mine are a whole group of students. But if there's ever anybody that wants to talk to me privately, that's not a problem. If it's in person, I ask them to just come back right at the end, or I ask everybody else to leave for a minute, and then people are really accommodating. On Zoom, I just pop into a breakout room with just that student, and everybody else can keep working through the problems that they were struggling with while I just pop into a breakout room. We have our little meeting and solve whatever problem. So if you just want to talk to your professor, that's an option. The other thing to do is to ask non-course questions, right? So this is your hour, or 2 hours, or however much time you have to ask any question you want of your instructor. And here's a hot tip: instructors like to talk about themselves. So that's, they'll tell you about their research, they'll tell you about their pathway. Ask non-course questions, and like a few good questions would be is what do you research and why do you like researching that? I bet you they'll talk the whole time. Right? What's your favorite topic to teach, or what's your favorite class to teach? That's another good question that'll kind of get the conversation going. And what was your pathway? Because I bet all of the professors that you think of as mentors, or you really admire them, they're probably all have a really different path that got them to the career they're in right now. And it might not be what you think it is, right? It's probably not, I did this and I did this and everything was perfect. It was probably more like, I tried this and that didn't work, so I tried this other thing, and then I got distracted by, this other job for a while, and then eventually I thought, I better, this is really my passion. And so who knows what it is, but everybody will have a unique story, and theirs are really fascinating, and they may inspire you in a way that you didn't expect. So I would do that. Even if you don't have a question, still show up. The other thing is, schedule an office hour appointment. I hear that a lot, where students will say, I can't ever come to your office hours. I'm like, why didn't, they'll be struggling in week 8 or 9, and why didn't you come see me in week 2 when you were having a hard time? And they said, well, I couldn't come because I had work or I had another class. And I said, well, you should have emailed me, right? So ask for an office hour appointment. Let them know that you can never come because of work. Because we try to pick times that we think are going to be convenient for students, but no, it's never going to be convenient for everybody. And usually I make sure in my calendar I have a few extra hours kind of blocked off that are available for appointments. So make sure you ask for appointments. I think that's probably, I'm going to stop there so you can ask your own questions, but those are some of my tips that I think work out pretty well.
Cool. Thank you so much. And for everyone that registered, I'll send out the slides to you, but also we'll be posting the recording to the First Gen student page. But we want to open up the floor for questions and then thank Dr. Kane once again and Nikki as well for sharing this time with us. But please feel free to ask any questions that you have. You can just unmute yourselves or drop questions in the chat, whatever works for you.
Oh, come on, you gotta have something.
I have a question, Dr. Kane.
Yes, LT.
Uh, so there were times when Nikki said, well, do I need to know this for the test or for the upcoming quiz? Is it okay to ask those types of things, or do professors get annoyed by that?
Oh, that's a great question. It kind of depends on how it's asked. So I've had students come to office hours with the learning objectives, and like that, their question is just to read me the learning objective and expect that I'm going to re-lecture about that. And that's something that gets a little frustrating because I mean, I did that in lecture. So if you have, what's your specific question about that? Do you not understand what it's trying to say? Is it that particular concept that you're stuck on? So usually I ask questions of the student to try to figure out where it is they're actually stuck. So that's pretty helpful. But when students say things like, so what do I need to know for the exam? It's kind of like, well, all of the stuff, it's in the learning objective is usually my response. Like, is it in the learning objective? I know not every instructor has learning objectives that they give students, but try to rephrase that question. Just like, instead of just saying, what do I need to know for the exam? Right? Try to rephrase it. Like I was reading this and I'm just not sure how in depth I should try to understand this. Is there some advice you could tell me about how much detail I should go into? Like that's a good way to say, what do I need to know for the exam without actually saying, what do I need to know for the exam?
Thank you.
Yeah, did that answer your question? First year experience?
It did, and it's good insider information, I think.
Great.
Thank you. We have 2 more questions. Thank you, LT. I'm gonna unmute you if that's okay.
Yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, that's good. I did have a quick question. So Dr. Kane, I wanted to know if you were currently doing any research projects and if you were opening them up to any of your students. Well, I don't really have you, but I think I will have you next quarter since I'm
okay. What class next quarter?
7B.
7B. Okay, great. So my job at UCLA is a full-time teaching faculty. So I don't have a research lab. I don't typically do research, but I am connected with and friends with lots of people who do. So my usual advice, this is something I talk about in office hours a lot too. And another question you can ask in office hours if you don't have questions on the actual course material is to ask about, how do I get involved in research? Or this is something I'm interested in. Do you know anybody who's doing research in that area? Right. So usually that's a conversation we have a lot. There's never too early to get involved in research if that's something you want to do. And I think it's a great thing to do because it gives you a lot of transferable skills into anything, right? Whether if you're going to do whatever you would decide to do after undergrad, the experience you get doing research in any field is going to be useful. So my research as an undergrad was in sugar beets and beans. So I was in an agricultural lab and I studied sugar beets and beans, and I learned a ton and I loved it. But so I would recommend a couple different resources. So there's the Undergraduate Research Center for the Sciences. They have a website. I think, I can't remember what it is right now, but if you email me, I can send it to you. But I think if you Google UCLA Undergraduate Research Sciences, it'll go right to their website. So they have tons of resources that'll help you kind of think about, what do you need to do? How do you enroll to get units for doing research? Because you can get units for doing that towards your course units. How do you reach out to people? My advice is always talk to your TAs. Your TAs are almost always graduate students that are doing research. And you know if you like your TA or not, and so you know whether they're nice or not, right? So ask them, or ask them if they know anybody, because usually grad students always need help, and are have a little more time and are, you know, want to mentor students. So that's something I would highly recommend. Yeah, I don't know.
Thank you very
What
much.
kind of research do you want to do, by the way?
I was thinking something like oncology or like cell development, or like something along those lines, you know.
Who's your 7A instructor? Are you taking 7A right now?
Yeah, I have it with Malloy.
Malloy, okay. Ask him if he knows anybody.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, Jeff is great. Dr. Malloy is great. So ask him. He can probably put you in touch with some people too.
Okay, thank you.
And any of your TAs in 7A too.
Okay, nice. Thank you.
Thank you both. We have another question in the chat that kind of connects to that one as well. And it's what's the ideal time for an undergraduate student to even start considering research opportunities?
So anytime, early is good. The earlier the better, if in some cases, because it helps you to build a relationship with that lab for years, and you can eventually, even as a, you know, a third or a fourth year, might want to do research, your independent research. So at first they kind of start out helping a grad student or a PI, the faculty member, you know, with some of their projects. But then once you have enough experience and they know that they can trust you, right, then they often will help you develop your own independent research. And so the earlier you start, the better. But just because you know, if you're a fourth year and you're like, oh, I'm about to graduate, but I still want to get some research experience and I haven't, that's not too late either. So pretty much there's no perfect time. I think any time is a good time. What was it? I totally lost my train of thought about what I was gonna say next. Yeah, it is harder. I saw the Anahita. Yeah, it is a lot harder right now to find research opportunities because everything is online. There are some labs that are kind of coming back, and I don't know what their protocols are. They have to be very careful about how many people are in the lab, but there are quite a lot of things that can be done online these days as well. So in ecology, for example, in marine ecology, it might be watching videos of fish eating algae underwater and determining how many times they take a bite in a certain number of, you know, minutes, which, you know, is just watching a little video and clicking a button every so often, and that's collecting data. So there are, you know, lots of things that are happening that you don't necessarily have to be in the lab for. So it's worth approaching people still and seeing if there's anything that they're doing that you could help with.
Thank you. It's just so nerve-wracking because like nothing's in person, and I wanted to have at least science labs in person, so that's why I moved here.
I feel your pain. I totally understand that. I'm the same. Like I want to be able to take students on field trips, and I want them to like be in the seawater lab and like touching wet, salty, gross things. So I completely understand.
Do you know if your lab, like the 109 lab, will be in person possibly next year? Is there any chance of science labs being in person?
In the winter. So in the winter, we're not going to be in person yet. So I think there are a few classes that we're able to petition for some in person for the winter, but we already had to submit our schedules and everything for winter. So winter will be, for most of the biology, the classes will be online still. Yeah.
Okay. It's
Yeah,
so different.
but I know it's so different, and it's hard for a lot of reasons, but it's also, so one thing that is frustrating, but also has come out of this that I think has been really great, is that, you know, the faculty, we've all taken a little bit more time to kind of redesign our courses and spend a little bit more time doing that this summer. Whereas in the, you know, spring, it was like so fast and we just kind of rolled with whatever we had, but we've all kind of spent more time this summer kind of redesigning and reimagining things. So there are things that I've always wanted to do for my classes and I never have been able to because I just didn't have the time to develop it. And now I did a little bit. So there's some new assignments. I've been able to update some things that I have been wanting to update and just never had the motivation and the time to do, right? So I think that you're going to find that in some ways, you're going to get some more unique opportunities in this format than you might have had in the lecture, because it's kind of forcing us to think outside the box a little bit and try some new things that we might not have tried because we were just used to just doing the same old thing we always did. So So it could be good. But yes, I definitely want us to be able to get out into the ocean and like touch things and poke at fish. So
thank you.
Yeah. What did you hear first? What did I say?
About the classes in the winter being online.
Yeah. Sorry, was I supposed to announce that? I don't
know. No, it's fine.
You got a sneak peek of information.
Yeah, and I don't know all departments. So I know that each department was asked to specifically petition for certain courses that like kind of needed to be in person. So I know that there are a few people who, have a particular type of lab that they might have had to do that for. But for most of us, we're just sticking with the safer at home situation. We're expecting, especially, if you're a bio major, this is also a really great opportunity to see what's going on in the real world and how it pertains to the stuff you're learning in your classes, right? So think about population growth and think about, disease vectors and transmission and all of that sort of stuff. So we're all expecting that, there could be another peak of, as people get kind of lazy with their safety precautions and bored of being at home, right? Like it's reasonable to think that we're going to get increases again, and so we don't want to risk anybody if we don't have to.
Sorry, y'all. You probably heard me squealing in excitement. The nerdy public health studying of epidemiology and me was like squealing over here about incubation period. So forgive me for that.
A lot of faculty are kind of incorporating COVID into some of their course material these days too. So like in our LS23L labs, I know they're doing some stuff about COVID, and because it relates to everything that we're trying to get biology students and STEM students to think about. And it's playing out literally in front of our eyes. So it's kind of as sad and frustrating as it is, it's a perfect example of what we're trying to get people to think about and, being informed so that you can make good decisions, even if you don't end up being in biology in the future, right? You can use what you know to make better life decisions.
Yeah. We have one more question in the chat. It says, is there a preferred type of research that graduate schools typically look for, or is it at all a preference?
It kind of depends on what kind of graduate school you're going to do, right? So if you're going into like a professional school, like a med school or a dental school or something, like having a little bit of medical lab research, or at least like molecular bio or physiology, I think that's going to be, a little bit more traditional wet lab stuff. I think that's probably going to be really useful. If you're thinking about graduate school and like, in one of the sciences, I think having some experience related to that field is always going to be helpful. But don't limit yourself, because like I said, my research was in agricultural, technology and as an undergrad, and I was like in greenhouses watering sugar beet plants and, in the lab doing like some chemistry and that's not at all what I do, what I did as my PhD at all. But I learned stuff in the lab that was really valuable, right? So I learned how a sterile technique, even though my research doesn't require sterile technique, but I know how to do it now. I learned about like measuring and preparing solutions, which again, I don't really do much, but so I think that those are great skills and just teaches you one responsibility, which sounds silly, but I think that knowing that you can follow directions in a lab protocol really well, and that you can be counted on to do it accurately and ask questions if you're not sure, that shows a lot of maturity that grad schools are looking for, right? And like I think LT said in the chat too that like you get to know the people you're working with. So the grad students, the PIs and the lab managers and things. And those are the people you want to build a relationship, because when you're thinking about grad school or professional school in the future, or even applying for jobs, you're gonna want references, right? You want references to know you. I always have students come to me who've had me for one class, their LS7B class in their first year, and now they're graduating, and will I please write them a letter? And that's the only class they've ever had with me. And I think, like, I feel for you. I want to be able to help you, but like physically it's not possible. Like I write so many letters of rec, right? And so who am I gonna, I only have so many hours in my day. And so even though some days those hours become 15 in a day, but of working, but I'm gonna write letters for the students. I'm gonna prioritize those that I know the most first, right? And then if I have any bandwidth left over, I might try to help out that student who's pretty desperate, who only had me for one class 4 years ago, but it's unlikely, right? So by working in a lab, getting to know those grad students, getting to know the PIs, getting to know the people there, they're gonna be your champions later, right? So that's a huge part of why to do research or have a job that you do, a job that you're doing really well in, or volunteering somewhere and really getting to know people, is because you really want them to be your champion later. Whoops.
No, you're
What
good.
else?
Can I just add a comment?
Yes.
Maybe two, for the students who are listening and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm so nervous about doing this, or just remember, UCLA doesn't make any mistakes in admission. So you were admitted because of your ability to be successful in this environment. And so you have absolutely what it takes to, reach out to your professors and do office hours. So even if you're nervous, take a stab at it anyway, right? The other thing I wanted to say, when I was a TA, I had one student who hung out with me because he was a commuter, and he would just come to my office hours in between classes. And he actually didn't necessarily ask me anything about the class. Mm-hmm. He knew that I liked basketball, and I was a Celtics fan. He was a Lakers fan. And so we just had a friendly rivalry. And of course, over time, we developed a relationship. That was back in 1999. We are still close to this day. So sometimes you don't just have to go and ask things about the exam or the content. Really get to know, like Professor Kane talked about those beets. I want to know more about those beets, those sugar beets. Is that what it was?
Oh, I'll tell you.
Yeah. So something,
you can have a whole Zoom.
Just get to know, let them get to know you as a whole person, and you get to know them too.
Well, those two things I wanted to, thank you for mentioning those, because one is, that don't feel like you don't belong there, because you definitely do. I have students always in my office go, I'm sorry, but can I ask you a question? I'm like, first, don't say you're sorry, because that's literally what we're doing here. I'm here so that you can ask me questions. You never apologize that you have a question, right? Like, that is why we teach. It's because you don't know, and you need to ask questions so that you can learn it. And we all were there. I still am there. I tell my students all the time, like, this is really hard. This part's really hard for me too, and I will make mistakes. So we'll figure it out together, right? So never, ever, ever feel like you have to apologize for asking a question. I stop my students every time they say, I'm sorry, but like, no, you're not sorry. You can ask this question. And the other one was, talk about anything else. So I gave you some like tips about like, things you can do at office hours, but so many times students just come by and go, hey, I saw you put a picture of kelp on your slides the other day. Have you ever been scuba diving in a kelp forest? And I'm like, yeah, let's talk. Or I went on this vacation once, and they tell me a story, and or sometimes we just sit and talk about, like, so where'd you grow up, what was it like, and I share stories and they share stories. And I've had 45-minute long conversations with students that had nothing to do with what we were studying in the class at all. And then other students come in and we loop them in, and before you know it, there's two students who've never met each other before, now best friends and going off to study together. And 20 years from now, they're still going to be best friends. And I know that happens because it happened to me in college. So do it. Don't ever feel like, and my office, I tell students, I have a little jar of snacks for students. I have a microwave, which I'm not supposed to have in my office, you know, so I'm always like, grab a snack, warm up your lunch, hang out, tell me your things, you know. So, you know, find those people. Every professor may not be that, right? Or they may not be that person for you, right? But somebody on campus is going to be that person for you. So find them.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in because I like agreed to a lot of these things from like a student's perspective.
Yeah.
Um, what's it called? Especially first and second year, I was a little bit more like soft spoken and out of my element. Granted, I later found out I was not in the right major and I switched. But like, yeah, if you don't speak up in office hours, other people will, and you will just sit there. And I've like, there's times where I've like sat there for like 30 minutes because I was afraid to raise my hand. No, save your time now.
Yeah. I've
And
also
like,
had students who like ask a couple of questions and then they're like, my next class isn't for 30 minutes. Can I just stay? I don't have any more questions, but I'm just going to work on my studying for this class. I'm like, cool. And I work on my stuff and they work on their stuff and we're, you know, we just chill. So sorry, Nikki, I just cut you off.
you're good. I was also just gonna say like, yeah, also like the not being afraid to ask questions. There are times I just won't get it until like the third time it's explained to me. It just needs to be reworded or like, um, it might not make sense how like my TA said it. I go to a different TA, or like you go to your professor, like you just keep like going down the line. That's easier to do that we're online. So yeah.
Yeah, I do. I have the same. I mean, the explanation I gave of tides to in this, you know, mock office hour, Anahita's going to get it again next week in class, and then she's probably going to get it again in office hours, and maybe by the third time it's all going to click, and I'm going to explain it well because the first time I sometimes don't explain things well. I often don't explain things very well, and it might take me a couple of tries to figure out the right wording too. So.
If we could take maybe one more question before we wrap up, anybody? I know we also had some folks that had to step out and rejoin. If anybody has any more questions before we close out and share some additional resources for you.
No.
No?
Should I put my email in the chat?
Yes, please drop your email in the chat. And Nikki, while Dr. Kane is doing that, if you could go to the next slide, I'll go over some resources and some upcoming events. So on Tuesday, two faculty members, Dr. Scott and Dr. Markeith, who are with Res Life and one of the faculty members that live on the Hill, for the Taco Tuesday, they'll be doing a versus battle. So this is a real out of the classroom experience. They're going to do an old school, new school music battle. So please come out Tuesday for that. The registration link is there. You can take a screenshot of this. So you can RSVP there or just go onto the Zoom link as well for that one. So I'll leave that there for a moment for you.
Sorry, I remembered something that I wanted to mention. We were talking about how early is it to do research and everything. My other good advice is don't overcommit yourself, right? So like your time is a really precious resource and you should guard that as much as you can. And that's really hard because there are events you want to go to and there are friends you want to meet up with and there's classwork you have to do and you want to get involved in research but you kind of know your energy limit and it's not necessarily even about time, it's about amount of energy that you have that you can give to something else, right? Because every little bit's going to suck up part of, you know, what you have left for something else. So think about what's the most important and really don't overcommit yourself, you know. You want to get involved in all of those things, but figure out which of those things that are going to be the most useful to you and also the most interesting to you, and like focus yourself on doing a few things well rather than spreading yourself too thin over too many things. And I've learned of that the hard way a lot of times. So yeah, so your time is valuable, your time is precious and yours. So use it wisely and don't overcommit it. And feel free to tell people no, right? No is a really important word.
I was
Okay,
gonna
that
say,
was it. I'm done now.
no, that's okay. I was gonna say it's also a complete sentence. Just no. I'm
No.
sorry. No, I'm sorry. Just no.
Yeah, you don't have to say you're sorry. You don't have to give a reason. You just say, no, I'm not going to do that.
Thank you so much. So if y'all got this screenshot, I'll flip to the next one. We just have some library resources for you. So incredible opportunity for if you need to rent out a laptop, a Wi-Fi, I see a MiFi or anything like that. So that's available to you if you go to the library website. You click to the next one. So college academic counseling, so also for academic support and curriculum requirements. They're also doing some of course, the virtual or digital office hours for that one as well. We can go to the next one. The UCLA community page, so you can figure out what are the programs and events happening. There's still stuff happening, even though campus is technically closed, there are still events and opportunities of engagement for all of you. We can keep going. And then student engagement and other activities and community programming offices. So if you still want to get connected, so post the enormous activities fair, there's still a lot of different activities and groups that you can get involved with. We can keep going. If you are able to vote, please vote, and please make sure if you've got your mail-in ballots or coming in through the mailroom, if you're on the Hill or if you're home, make arrangements to be able to do that if you're able. And if you're not, please continue to encourage your friends to do so. Let's keep going. And then even if you still want to engage with our living learning communities, or what's also known as our themed communities or student organizations, you can take a screenshot here and then you can screenshot those QR codes. So if it's sports, business, transfer students, out-of-state students, so the communities that we have that usually live together, there's still virtual programs and things to keep those folks connected to one another that are going on. And I'm answering a question in the chat. Does the library still have collaboration learning center sessions? I'm not, go ahead and check their website. They do have some sessions still going on. And actually, if you go to our digital care package, we have a link to some of the current library resources, and I'll give you a link to that in our next slide, or slide to the next. So we also have this Bruin State of Mind care package that's released for True Bruin Welcome. We did one for week 1 that's kind of back to school. So it has the free Zoom backgrounds, stickers, mental health care package, the library resources that I shared before. So if you click on that, they should tell you on their website if they're going to have their hours that they had or the sessions that they had before. If you have not gotten your free passion planner, you can sign up for your free passion planner by going through the digital care package. And I think you have to pay for some shipping, but the passion planner itself is free. And then this will come out again weeks 3, 6, and 9, and then finals week. You'll also find some playlists that go along for midterms coming up, and just some general playlists from Bruin Bash and things like that. And then we can skip to the next slide. And then if you want to contact us, so UCLA Slack, if y'all don't know, as of the 19th, Slack UCLA is how we're going to be communicating for a lot of things. If you go to the First to Go Facebook page or UCLA First Gen Student Facebook page, it's our digital community, and this is where this content will live. And just email us as a unit to the first year experience at orl.ucla.edu as well. And then Dr. Kane, I believe we have your email address in the chat. If y'all did not get that, it's there. If y'all registered, I will send you the notes from the chat. I will send you the PowerPoint, and then post the PowerPoint to our first generation student UCLA page as well next week. But it's 6:03, so I just want to thank everyone for being here this evening. Thank you so much, Dr. Kane, for dropping that again. And have a great weekend, y'all. Have a great weekend.
Yeah, thank you guys for coming. It's nice to see faces, smiling faces. I love it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tonya. You're the best. You're the best.
Thank you, LT.
Thank y'all.
Good night,
If anybody
Shalori.
has
Good night.
any other questions, feel free to ask.
We'll be here for a little bit. Hang out.
Cool. Thanks, Nikki, for all your help too.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank y'all. Appreciate you so
Problem.
much.
Alrighty.
Okay.
So I end the meeting?
Yes, yes.
All right.
All right, have a good weekend.
Thank you.